Hey, it's Holly D, and you're listening to That Med Kid. Just a disclaimer, while I try my best to broadcast correct information, I'm still learning. The content here is not a substitute for actual medical advice or absolute knowledge whatsoever. Albeit very interesting, this week's episode is a little bit funky. We're going to be discussing the topic of cannibalism, so I don't recommend listening to this around young ears or if the topic makes your stomach lurch a little. So let's get into it. I first watched In the Heart of the Sea before a diving trip because I thought that was a very good idea to get me hyped about being stranded in the ocean. And heads up, a bit of a spoiler alert, there was a scene where Thomas Nickerson's somber voice said, "We ate the heart first." Now, this epic story in itself was incredibly intense to watch, but the first question that came up in my mind was, and how many calories would that be? No, not because I intend to become cannibalistic, but because I wanted to know whether the nutritional profile of the human body would be enough to sustain the surviving crew. Right, so of course there are ethical, social, and moral factors to this taboo topic, but let's just focus on the biology today. Why cannibalism? Cannibalism is actually very common in the animal kingdom, from mice that eat their babies to embryonic sand tiger sharks feasting on its younger siblings intrauterine. We'd think there'd be some sort of benefit to it, right? Well, anybody out there on the paleo diet? For those of you who are unfamiliar, the paleo diet is a modern fad diet where you're only to consume foods presumed to have been available or consumed by humans during the Paleolithic era. This fad going in and out of style since 1970s, the idea that humans evolved eating a specific diet, and because we aren't eating those particular foods, means you aren't healthy. I mean, apart from the fact humans are vastly more healthy than we were 50,000 years ago due to vast technological advancements like, well, soap and toothpaste, then if you're on the paleo, perhaps you should add human meat to your grocery list for more authenticity. Cannibalism was part of the original paleo diet, accounting for up to 10% of our protein and something that is archaeologically evident in our history. The more closely related your meal is to you, the more closely the nutritional profile will suit your needs, and that logically makes human meat most nutritious to humans, right? Loads of studies done in all kinds of animals have found carnivores are healthier when they're fed members of their own species or species closely related to them. But are we really that great in nutritional profile, and why did we resort to cannibalism? Here's the bottom line. Humans aren't nutritious. At least, not compared to other sources of food available during the Paleolithic era. So, James Cole, an archaeologist at the University of Brighton, set out to further prove this in a recently published study in the journal Scientific Reports. He turned to studies from the 1940s and 50s, which analyzed the protein and fat content of 4 dead males between the ages of 35 to 65. Based on the analysis, Cole was able to calculate an average caloric value for various human body parts in this great wonderful table, which I'll put a link to on my website. The torso and head, for instance, contain 5,419 calories, according to Cole's calculations. Meaty human thighs have 13,355 calories. The heart clocks in at around 651 calories, while the brain, spinal cord, and nerve trunks collectively contain 2,706 calories. The biggest organ of your body, the skin, contains 10,278 calories, and also has the highest protein content of 25%. All told, Cole concludes, the human body contains about 125,822 calories. That might seem like a lot, but it's paltry next to what's found in some of the other food sources consumed by our early ancestors. We fall within expected range of calories for an animal of our average body weight, like a small deer for instance, but we are significantly lower in caloric value when compared to single large fauna like mammoth, horse, or bears, with greater calorific return per individual than many of the groups of cannibalized human remains. According to Cole's calculations, a group of 25 modern humans could survive for about 60 days on the remains of a mammoth, which contains 3.6 million calories. A human corpse, by contrast, would feed the same group for less than a day. It's also worth considering about half the calories in human meat come from adipose tissue, and consuming that much fat can pose problems on its own. I'm no nutritionist, but I can imagine I'd be chastised upon in a society raging against foods high in saturated fats. People like to believe cannibalism only occurs in cases of severe stress when alternatives are not possible. But cannibalism is actually a normal phenomenon in many natural populations. So if nutrition alone, or gastronomic cannibalism, cannot explain why humans resorted to eating each other, Cole suggests, it seems likely that cannibalistic episodes were driven by social and cultural motivations, or cultural cannibalism. Quote, "We know that modern humans have a range of complex motivations for cannibalism that extend from ritual, aggressive, and survival to dietary reasons," he writes in the study. Why then would a hominin species, such as the Neanderthals, who seem to have had varying attitudes to the burial and treatment of their dead, not have an equally complex attitude towards cannibalism? End quote. This conclusion falls in line with an existing school of thought, which suggests, based on archaeological evidence, that cannibalistic episodes were motivated by social, cultural, and spiritual factors. At Goff's Cage in Cheddar Gorge, for example, really close to me in Bristol actually, archaeologists found a large hoard of human bones that showed evidence of defleshing soft tissue from the skull, extraction of the eyes, cutting of the tongue, and all that cool stuff. So, an actually very meticulous process. There was also evidence of chewing. The people who gnawed on the bones probably didn't do so out of hunger. There were plenty of animal remains found within the cave, and some of the human bones appeared to have been marked with ritualistic etchings. But Cole's caloric comparisons cannot discount the possibility that humans used one another to supplement their diets. Ancient humans were likely opportunistic feeders, as Cole acknowledges in his study. Perhaps they turned to cannibalism when someone passed away, as an easy way to fill their bellies. Perhaps they resorted to eating one another when other food sources were scarce. Ultimately, every cannibalistic episode happened under different circumstances. No one can say for sure why our ancestors opted for the occasional human snack. But Cole's findings lend further credibility to the notion that some ancient cannibals were acting out of choice, not desperation. So let's look at the risk of eating humans, as if before you were even considering it. Number 1, disease. You're more likely to catch one because you're much more closely related, an example being the 1920 situation in Papua New Guinea. Kuru disease, as it's named, started spreading amongst the Fore tribe people. Kuru is a prion disease, the same as mad cow. Our bodies suck at breaking down protein in excess, and these misfolded proteins will accumulate in our brain and destroy the neurons until we die. The symptoms range from shivering like tremor, loss of coordination, to giggling fits, and eventual death. Hundreds of people were dying every year in the Fore tribe. Kuru is not contagious, unless you eat something with it. Until 1950s, mortuary feasting was practiced to honor the dead and mourn the past, and was found to be the cause of this Kuru outbreak in Papua New Guinea. The elderly Fore people who survived Kuru were found to have genetic changes that possibly made them resistant to prion diseases, and found similar genes around the globe. So here is yet more evidence for our undeniable cannibalism and prion disease common in our evolutionary history. So we know that diseases are a big thing and pose huge risks to eating humans, but strangely enough, there are fewer examples of it causing disease than there should be. And if we really had to consider some advantages to eating humans, well, it can actually protect others from catching the dangerous diseases, because sure, eating them exposes you to more pathogens, but at the same time, you're protecting the rest of the community from coming into contact with the diseased corpse. Most microbes are destroyed by eating them. Through death and action of getting rid of the body means less disease spreading around, and this can slow or stop disease, but obviously you would get prion disease yourself. So you might think, well, the net effect might make it worth the risk to eat a human snack, right? But let's not forget your morals, your ethics, and everything else that our society stands by in order to make it a harmonious place. And let's just stick with medicine to help fight the disease, shall we? Don't think that cannibalism is some kind of sick, heroic action, that you're saving everybody else, or that you're bulking on the protein content of the skin for gains. I think the weirdest and creepiest thing I stumbled across whilst researching for this topic was when I was searching up calories of the human heart, my FitnessPal came up and said, 1 cup is 200 calories. Now, not only is that value overwhelmingly incorrect according to Cole's calculations, but it's just so horrifically wrong. I'm really terrified to think who would ever input that into their nutritional log. But anyway, bottom line, don't eat humans. Makes things a bit less complicated. Thank you so much for listening, and if you liked this, please subscribe for more episodes on Apple Podcasts, and if you're feeling especially generous today, I'd really appreciate it if you could write a quick review. You can also find everything that I've mentioned in this episode plus more on my website, thatmedkid.com. This has been That Medkid. My name is Holly D. Stay kind, my friends.